so many Microsoft partners are saying, "Hey, I'm waiting for the leads. Where is it?" And they complain. I even hear that to this day. The thing is, it's like a marriage. You gotta bring something to them, and then they'll bring something to you as well. And it's all about trust and relationships.
Welcome to the Business of Microsoft Partners podcast. I'm Scott Easton, where we empower the Microsoft community through conversations with leaders, practitioners, and consultants of Azure and Microsoft solutions. Today, I'm extraordinarily pleased to be joined by Mark Pierce. Mark is the general manager of the Microsoft Group for ivision, an Atlanta-based Microsoft business partner. Mark is a seasoned IT professional of over 30 years of experience in the industry, where today at ivision, Mark leads the group's activities, including developing and delivering innovative and secure cloud and AI solutions across various verticals. Prior to joining ivision, Mark was the co-founder of Infrascience, another Microsoft business partner who was ultimately acquired by New Signature. Mark, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Good to see you again, Scott. Glad to be on.
Awesome. Well, Mark, I want to take you back, way back. I want to hear more about the founding of Infrascience. And I've heard through the grapevine that there was a infamous lunch at the Home Depot's headquarters in the lunchroom where most business plans are hatched. Tell me about that lunch and how it really changed the direction of your lives.
Yeah, it was really cool story here, and literally, it's you hear these things on writing something on back of a napkin, and it actually happens, and this is really what happened, and in my life, and I've been consulting since I graduated from college back in the early '90s, and I really love consulting and seeing different environments, meeting different customers, and always had that that close touch engagement. At that time, Jeff Meyer, who was one of my partners at Infrascience, myself and Phil Bartholomew were working for a company called Extreme Logic. And we actually closed a pretty large deal with Home Depot. They were actually moving from Lotus Notes and Novell NetWare back 2002, 2003. And we were competing against Hewlett Packard. And Extreme Logic was a fairly small consultancy company. And we were going against a giant, and we were working with Microsoft. We had some great deep relationships with Microsoft, and we knew some people at Home Depot, and we won the deal. So we beat Hewlett Packard. And about 6 months later, Hewlett Packard purchased Extreme Logic. Well, so that kind of how the story begins. And to fast track a little bit, coming from a small consultancy, going to a big global system integrator has its own challenges with internal competes with each other, a lot of politics, and a lot of things that were just slowing things down, even with Home Depot. And at that point, I was on the project. I was actually the project manager running this program to move from Lotus Notes and NetWare to Windows. And it was very frustrating to get things done with Hewlett Packard. It's a great company. It's a big company. At that time, Carly was running the show, but there was a lot of politics involved and a lot of people wanting to take ownerships on stuff that they really don't need to own and had no business being there. So one day, Jeff Meyer, Phil, and myself, we were all working at the Home Depot doing this migration, and we were meeting in the lunchroom saying, you know what? We could do this, what we did with Home Depot, even better if we had our own company. So literally, one by one, Phil, Jeff, and I started this company called Infrascience. So we started hopping off the HP train and hopping on to the Infrascience train. And we started off just Jeff, Phil, and myself, and a couple of contractors that we knew very well. And we just had a very close relationship with Microsoft and kept growing it. So over time, off that, back of the napkin type, hey, let's do this. That was the birth of Infrascience.
That's amazing. So it all started in the lunchroom and it really grew from there. So what were those? So you go ahead and you leave HP. were you still working with Home Depot at that time, or did you go out and with Microsoft ultimately gain new clients? How did that transition from HP to really getting your first client at Infrascience work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I wasn't going to go ahead and take business away from HP. Being very ethical, I would complete that project. But what Phil and Jeff did is that they started Infrascience, and I was coming on back in as I was completing the project. And during that time, we were actually working with Microsoft, um, building a clientele with the names of like Macy's at that time and Cox and other large companies. And we were just over time building it first of all, with really good contractors that we trust. And then at that point, we're at a point is, okay, let's go ahead and either hire those contractors, which we did as full-time employees, and then eventually add it on. This was all what we call bootstrapping. This was from, you know, putting our homes in equity on the line for credit lines and stuff like that as we grow. I mean, because you have the other areas of, you got to do the insurance, health insurance. You got to, understand what an LLC is. So we were learning as we went. But over time, we continued to grow. We bring people that we trusted and we knew. We built those Microsoft relationships so that they could go to us and that we'll provide a really good client experience as well as keeping them involved every step of the way and able to grow from a company from really Jeff, Phil, and myself and a couple of contractors to over 150 people in 3 different physical locations in North Carolina, in Atlanta, and in Georgia.
That was the high mark with your employee count was 150 employees.
It was, and it was a great experience. We did it for about almost 15 years, and then we had this transition over to New Signature, which was another story altogether.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure there's another story in there as well. So, take me back in the early days of Infrascience. How did you all, between you, Phil, Jeff, how did you all divide the responsibilities? Were you in charge of, say, delivery, and Jeff was in charge of sales, or were you all working together? How did you divide up all those responsibilities amongst the co-founders?
It was very unique when you build a business with your friends, and they're very close friends even today. But we all had our different types of expertise. So Phil Bartholomew was very much, obviously he was into Microsoft technology. He was technical, especially on the identity space, as you know, Scott. But he also had a strong financial sense about him. So he was taking care of the financial side. Jeff was doing more of the sales side, along with myself. So Jeff was also involved on the HR side of bringing in people, making sure we're hiring the right people and having the benefit packages, 401ks, and so on. For me, it was all about my relationship building with Microsoft. So building that strong partnerships. I was a partner guy, so it's working with Microsoft, working with my software, working with some of our key partners that we could build our clientele and build good experiences with our clients which was my focus. So with that type of blend, with Jeff doing more of the HR and sales side, me doing the partnership and sales side, and Phil doing the finance side, it all came together.
That's fantastic. So, it was great to be able to divide up all those responsibilities and have kind of everyone focus on their swim lane. So now here's a question, and certainly we can edit this out if needed, but tell me about, you've got 3 founders. What happened when there was a disagreement? How did you handle those scenarios? Because, obviously you all are friends, but when you work together in a business, there's certain competing interests and differences of opinion. How do you handle those type of differences?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, we did have our differences, but there were nothing to the differences of like, I'm leaving the company. We would all work it together. We would meet at our office. We would meet weekly and kind of go over, where we are financially. There were some pitfalls that we had, of course, in 2007, 2008, when the whole economy went down the pot. together we were able to make some good decisions. And you remember that downturn? We took actually, one of the big things is we took our own, haircuts on our pay before our employees did. We didn't lay anybody off, which was awesome. And we switched our focus into healthcare versus some of the other verticals that were suffering, because that was where the money was at that point for us to survive. Um, the disagreements we had disagreements, but you know what? They weren't. It's just like a marriage, right? You work through it, and those disagreements, slowly pass, and you have a lessons learned, and you move forward. Um, so yeah, we never really had any bad, really major disagreements where it was going to cause us to break up our partnership. We treated it like a marriage.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, on a happier note, in your early days at Infrascience, what was your biggest win? What, thinking back, what was the moment where you're like, wow, we're kind of on our way? What was that spark or project or opportunity that really, where you said, you know what, this is what made the risk worth it?
We had some really good big wins with Microsoft with a company our size. And I told you a little bit about what we did with the Lotus Notes migration with Home Depot. And, I think Coca-Cola was one that we could really talk about when we started, as a little company. We won doing a Lotus Notes migration with Coca-Cola Consolidated up in Charlotte. And the way the bottlers work is that they're independent, but they're very close knit. So I think a turning point is when we started really doing a great job. Microsoft loved us, so what we did with Coca-Cola Consolidated, along with Coca-Cola themselves, and the word spread to other bottlers, and we started increasing our clientele just for word of mouth, just within the Coca-Cola community. So that was a big brand boost for us to take it to another level. We did the same thing with other companies around the Southeast and really started getting our name up with Microsoft, to the point is that we were a finalist for Partner of the Year in Cloud back in, I want to say it was 2014. But yeah, I think, those type of key moments were turning points where you kind of go through a stair-step process into of a company, and keeping the company very personal and our employees very engaged, where we didn't have much attrition at all. And they enjoyed what they did, and they enjoyed the challenges, along with increasing, our satisfaction with Microsoft. And I think that was the key thing, is that I keep bringing up Microsoft, and I believe this is that Microsoft's partnership system is top notch compared to other companies that I've worked with in the past, other partner companies, because they truly want you to be engaged to bring a full solution to their clients.
You've referenced several times Microsoft being a real key to the ultimate growth to Infrascience. How did you nurture those Microsoft partnerships? What was that like? What was kind of your day-to-day strategy as far as ultimately being able to grow that partnership?
A lot of it was trust, communication, and the ability to get our go-to-markets out to our partnerships with Microsoft fast. Especially in today with AI, even more important. But even with back then, it was more of, we do good jobs with the clients. We actually keep Microsoft involved before, during, and after an engagement. And I think that was key, because one of the big things that Microsoft has, and if you understand their ecosystem, their year end is June 30th. And then they kind of go off on a hiatus for a couple of weeks, and then they go full force into mid-July. And a lot of times the accounts, their ownership and accounts change. So you may have a Microsoft team, and with one company that's no longer there, then you got a whole brand new Microsoft team. Well, where are you going to have that glue with that client now? Though the glue is going to be coming from the partner. So we work with a new Microsoft team, keep them up to date, and build that trust relationship and move forward for that year. So like I said, it's communication, it's trust, It's understanding how Microsoft works, and you learn over time. And it's really at the end of the day is, at the end, what can you provide to Microsoft and the client and your clients to have a really good experience? And that type of experience with WinWires and some other things that we do really help move our partnership in a very positive direction. And not a lot of partners understand that. Or they just don't treat it as seriously as they should. They treat it as another partner like a Cisco or a Fortinet. It's different. It's really a relationship.
And so you're essentially bringing clients down to the Microsoft building, which the one in Atlantic Station is extraordinarily impressive. And so it's beautiful. So you're collaborating with Microsoft, with the clients, and really, as you just said, you're bringing something to Microsoft, and Microsoft is reciprocating and helping drive that opportunity with the client. So it sounds like a great formula. So that's fantastic.
You really have to do that. Microsoft partners are saying, "Hey, I'm waiting for the leads. Where is it?" And they complain. I even hear that to this day. The thing is, it's like a marriage. You gotta bring something to them, and then they'll bring something to you as well. And it's all about trust in relationships. Understanding that Microsoft ecosystem is critically important, and understand what their scorecard and metric is for them to make their year. Now, we also advocate for our clients too, obviously. But there's got to be that triangle of trust with the client and with Microsoft, and with my philosophy of running a company, and ivision is very similar. I'll do one thing that we do too is we do a lot of stuff with the Microsoft Technology Center in Atlanta, and we do in other places too. But Atlanta is very unique with Atlantic Yards, with that new complex they have. It's one of the few executive briefing centers that Microsoft has in this type of caliber. There's only 4 around the world. And we're lucky to be one of those. And bringing in clients with the Microsoft architects that we have great relationships, and talking about new technologies and helping them roadmap to see, the future and build those business use cases for them is a real benefit for them and to Microsoft. And of course, with ivision, help them grow.
Going back just a little bit, one question that I've always had for you is, how did you get into consulting? You talked about the early days at Extreme Logic and working at Home Depot and HP. How did you decide to get into consulting, and what was going on after college for you?
Boy, we are going way back in the past. When you talk about this 30 years experience, it shows my age. But so when I graduated from college, as any college kid, you're looking for, okay, where's my job? What can I do? And at that point, back in the early 90s, Novell was the big technology before Microsoft really came into play. So what I did is, before I graduated, I started taking these NetWare exams to get more into technology. And luckily, I was one of the few people didn't have the best GPA in my, in college, but I had a job waiting for me before I even graduated, which at that time there was not a lot of people, even with a 4.0, that even had the ability to have a job. And part of that job was working with doing NetWare implementations for CPA firms. So I was going, here I am, 22, 23 years old, going down to these different CPA firms, implementing this new NetWare file server print service stuff. And soon after, as I got more involved in technology, and it wasn't that that far along, is that I got involved with an association called CNEPA, and this is now defunct with the internet and how communication has evolved. But it was an organization, a user group organization that was funded by Novell, and I quickly started a chapter here in Atlanta, grew it up to about 200 people a month coming to different venues where we have vendors doing presentations on new technologies, and then decide, hey, you know what? I'll just go ahead and go try to be a board member. And I became a board member for the CNEPA, and learned a lot about how companies work and how Novell worked. Um, Met my wife actually in Utah, where CNEPA was based, and we just finished our 30-year anniversary. So kind of married into the system.
Oh, wow. You met her at a board meeting or?
So yeah, she actually worked at Novell, and I met her, and I wasn't even thinking anything about it, and had a long distance relationship. And at that time, we don't have this free, calling like we do today. And it was cheaper for me to marry her than to keep having long conversations with her with a phone bill that was astronomical for a 23-year-old. But yeah, so kind of married in the technology. We actually wrote a book on NetWare 5. You can still find it on Amazon. Not a bestseller anymore, but you could put my name in there and type NetWare. You can see me there, and that happened as well. And had had 3 kids, and my oldest one is working in data analytics for United Airlines. So kind of
Oh, wow. Okay. So carrying on the family tradition in technology here.
yeah, yeah. I warned him not to do it, but he did it anyway. But he's doing very well.
There you go. So going back to the board that you were on, you were 23 and on this board and essentially running this organization with NetWare at 23 with 200 people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I'd say that's 200 people in my chapter. We had over 6,000 members in the CNEPA. So it's one of those things you learn a lot at a young age, and you kind of sit back and listen to a lot of these board members that were much older and more mature and advanced, that with a lot of wisdom, and that helped me grow more as a consultant as well as an entrepreneur.
I can imagine. And again, it goes with the whole theme of it sounds like your strategy and part of your career has really been staying as close to the major vendors and partners as possible and really cultivating those relationships over time. I mean, people now can look back at NetWare and, kind of, I don't want to say laugh, but they're like, oh, it was not. I mean, I got started in NetWare also. And you look back in the 90s and think, okay, that was, somewhat basic compared to what we have today. But people forget NetWare back in the 90s literally had 90% of the market share for corporate networks. And it was huge. And, Microsoft ultimately came up with what was it, Windows 3.1, and that supplanted them. And Microsoft was on their way. So, yeah, NetWare was the, I mean, that was the big gorilla in the room at the time. So that's an amazing story that helped launch your career, launch your family, and your wife's even got a book from it. So that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's really is interesting, and the Novell saga is actually interesting when you understand the insides on how that worked and how Microsoft kind of took the market share. I even had that in my book when it was published in '98 about the fear of what could happen, and it was kind of a Nostradamus effect where it actually did happen. I didn't expect that to happen so quickly, but it just shows how technology changes so quickly and the market changes quickly if you're not keeping up to date.
Yes, exactly. And, interestingly enough, I also did a lot of work in Lotus Notes also, and a very similar type of pattern where my Lotus Notes, again, one of those where people, today will hear Lotus Notes and snicker a little bit, but people forget in the early 90s, mid 90s, up to 2005, Lotus Notes again was the collaboration software. I also did a lot of work in the Coke system, and Coke ran their sales force on Lotus Notes. And we had a huge Lotus Notes system. And, but ultimately, Microsoft did the same thing, is that they made incremental gains against that platform. And IBM got caught sleeping with Lotus Notes and was ultimately passed by Microsoft and SharePoint and Exchange and all those type of things. And we even see that most recently with Intune, with AirWatch and mobile device management, probably Purview and data management. So Yeah, completely agree. It's amazing how that pattern just has played out over 30 years in our industry of Microsoft being laughed at for not having a viable product. And then all of a sudden you wake up and, you've been lapped by Microsoft and you got to find a new platform.
And you're seeing the same thing happening with Broadcom with the VMware acquisition. And I'm starting to see that shift where a lot of clients are moving off of VMware now. And they go in the cloud, not even in VMware and Azure anymore. They want to go native. Um, Same thing I could say with Splunk, with Sentinel. I mean, you see these different changes going around in the environment as a consultant, and you see what customers are doing, which is very insightful versus if you work for a firm, you may not have that view as a consultancy where you've seen all these changes that are really happening, and eventually it does happen full blown in the next 12 to 24 months if people don't change course.
Exactly. And I think again, going back to the early days where you talk about with Infrascience riding that wave of Lotus Notes migrations, and what were you migrating them to? Was that Exchange or were they going directly to BPOS at that time from Lotus Notes?
At that point, we were doing both. We were doing both at that point, and of course, we went to. There was a lot of investment from Microsoft. I think that's a key thing as far as the partnerships versus other partners, is that Microsoft offers investment funds to clients that we can use on their behalf to actually move them faster into the cloud. And I think that helped Microsoft get that saturation they need for people that were very much fearful of the cloud back in the day, and having that confidence moving to the cloud will not only make um, their balance sheet look a lot better, but also, as far as redundancy and reliability, they had that trust. And now you see where they are now with our artificial intelligence and some of the other um, big features are coming up with almost daily. Um, why people would continue to grow in the cloud.
Yes. Well, with that whole transition where Infrascience rides the Lotus Notes migration wave, you're coming into the early cloud days, and you build Infrascience up to 150 people. You've got some tremendous success where you went from the lunchroom at Home Depot to now all of a sudden you've got 3 offices, you've got a tremendous brand, and now it comes time to sell. What was that like where you've experienced tremendous growth, tremendous success? You've literally put your house up to make this baby work, and now it comes time to sell it and turn it over to somebody else. What was that like? What's going through your head when you Phil and Jeff said this is the offer we want? What was the mixture of emotions that were going through your mind?
Well, it's interesting. We were not even looking to sell. We've always had, a lot of it were the LSPs. When I say LSPs, the SHIs, the world, and the sources that were coming up to us saying that we want to buy the company, and you guys could go off and get a get a boathouse or whatever and be gone. It's not what we wanted, right? We wanted our culture to stick, and we were just continuing down the line. We knew that the cloud was going to take a lot of investment because it's a shift, it moves faster, and you need to have a managed services play as well, and that takes some additional capital. But at that time, we weren't even thinking about really selling until a point where we actually had a breakfast with actually SHI. At that point, was one of our partners, and the SHI rep said, "Hey, did you hear about New Signature being purchased in private equity under Columbia Capital?" And Jeff was with me at that lunch. He says, "No, we didn't. We didn't know that." And said, "That's interesting." And then we came back and we knew the CEO of New Signature from our interactions at WPC, which is now Inspire. And we said, "Hey, we're going to call you know Chris Hurst." At that time was the CEO, and congratulate him. And we did. And one of the things Chris said was, "I said, interesting that you called." We really? Well, yeah, because we need to grow the Southeast, and you were one of the top 5 partners that Columbia Capital is looking at. So it's interesting. We talked to that. We just happened to talk to him and congratulate him and just trying to find out a little bit about how that occurred. And Chris was saying, "Hey, you know what? We were actually talking about you." So, at that point, conversations went really fast. And you learn a lot when you're selling something that you own for so long. It's like, you're giving up part of a family member um, at that point. But what was really neat with New Signature is like, look, we want you to be our Southeast region. And you're like the best partner in the Southeast that we've talked to. Your Microsoft relationships are strong. Your everything on you don't have a lot of debt. You're really running a really good ship. And we want you to be part of that journey. So part of that in journey was when we sold, and it did, took some years off our lives because there's a lot of auditing and a lot of stuff you had to keep under the covers because we can't let people know. We can't let our, our bookkeeper and our accounting team know, but they have to have access to the books, right? So it was kind of like a covert thing as you start going through this journey. Um, but at the end, it was something we felt we enjoyed the partnership with what the capital company was offering with New Signature, the advancement for our employees. And part of our risk was we did take some money for the acquisition, but we also took a good piece of equity into this new venture with New Signature. So we actually own part of New Signature. Jeff, Phil, and I did, and we were because our plan was to stay on for a certain number of years as those grew, and eventually, with that equity we have, and what happened with the acquisition with New Signature to Cognizant, that equity actually paid off in tenfold versus the money that we actually received.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I don't think we would have been where we were, as Infrascience. If we continued to grow, we wouldn't be as to a point where New Signature was. Because without that type of investment from the outside to actually grow and have that managed risk, it just, as fast as technology grew with the cloud, it would be really, really difficult.
Again, it sounds like it was a very stressful situation to go through that. I would imagine just, from a business and emotional perspective, but seeing that ultimate payoff must have been extraordinarily gratifying.
Yeah. So everything happens seems to with a lunch with me, and it probably happens with a lot of people in the industry. So, you know, iVision's has a great company. I've known them for many years. Matter of fact, the founder of iVision was Gabe Damiani, who's no longer at iVision. He actually has a coffee shop now and doing very well. He kind of got out of the technology piece of it. But Gabe was actually one of my clients when I was over at Extreme Logic. And at that point, we were actually shifting to, moving to Infrascience to start our own company, Jeff Meyer and I and Phil. And we actually, Gabe was thinking about doing the same thing over at AGL, a really sharp guy. So we said, hey, maybe Gabe would want to be part of this venture that we're going on. And we had a lunch at the Vortex in Midland. Great burgers, by the way. And we were talking, and he had his vision of working with Microsoft and working with some other vendors outside of Microsoft. And we were very much more of, hey, you know what? We have a great relationship with Microsoft. We want to kind of go pure play with Microsoft on everything. So he started a company called iVision, and we started Infrascience, and we went our different ways. What's interesting is how we choose different paths, but our paths cross again. And that happens in our industry. So when I was acquired, New Signature was acquired by Cognizant. It's very much of a global system integrator mentality with hundreds of thousands of employees and hundreds and thousands of people offshore. To me, it did not have that nice feel that I was used to with building those Microsoft relationships. And it's not the fault of Cognizant; it's just how big they are and how they, And I wanted to have that more of that client touch feel that I don't feel I was providing with Cognizant. So I was actually looking to retire. I was talking to a lot of other companies that came out to talk to me and say, hey, come over to be here. And David Decketts, who's the CEO of ivision, just pinged me on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, you know what? Let's talk because we recently have some private equity and we want to go ahead and take our Microsoft team to the next level. You have a lot of good experience. We know each other. We trust each other. Um, let's kind of make the dream happen." And that was exciting to me. So it's like, okay, I get to do what I love to do and, bring on talent. And I know some of the talent that are already over at ivision, which were incredible people that have been there for many years that I have deep respect for and trust. So I know that moving to ivision was going to be a very exciting time for me because I was allowed to do what I need to do to build those relationships. And I had great people already at ivision there that would support me.
Right. Well, that's exciting. So talk to me today about what's going on at ivision. I mean, obviously, as you've spoken about very eloquently in our conversation here today, that there are lots of changes happening in the industry. I mean, most notably AI. What's ivision doing in AI, and what are some ways that you're looking to help your clients?
It's kind of like, AI has kind of hit everybody like a fire hose really quickly the past 18 months and changes a lot. So one of the things with Microsoft, we are a managed partner, which I think is important. And less than 1% of all partners worldwide are managed, and that number continues to shrink with Microsoft.
Right. So just for the sake of everyone's edification here, when you say managed partner, what does that mean? Or a Microsoft managed partner, what does that specifically mean?
Good question. So it puts us into a different tier with other partners. It puts us into a where there's more expectations for us versus other partners as far as how we grow the business with Microsoft technology. And in turn, we have a dedicated partner development manager that works with us to help us grow and gets us into new programs as well. Funding programs, especially right now when we talk about saturating the market with AI, is important. Where companies want to kick the tires, and how they're going to kick the tires without spending millions of dollars doing it. Getting that Microsoft investment, the ability for us to learn the new technologies early is also a good benefit as well, because we do have a commitment to Microsoft versus some of the other players out there, Google and AWS. And it's one of the reasons why we have a strong focus on Microsoft. On the AI side, we have done a lot of go-to-markets around that. And part of it, obviously, is Copilot. And I have to remember I need to say Copilot at least 50 times a day. And we hear it all the time, but it's a really cool technology. And if customers have not played with it, they really need to get a couple of licenses to understand how it works. But what's awesome about it, too, is that it makes productivity across all roles of the organization increase, because the stuff that you get to do with typing emails or looking up something, you can move a lot faster on an AI type chat or search versus doing it through regular searches through SharePoint and other methods. Or if you need to get something prepped with a Word doc or a presentation, there's a lot of cool things you could do with it. So the first offering we came out with is really security around Copilot, because one of the things that you have to realize with Copilot is, and AI in general, is that it's going to take a look at everything that you have. And if you don't have a secure environment, or let's say if Scott, if you're in a role, let's say you are a recruiter in HR for a company and decided to move to sales, and for some reason security didn't move all your roles and remove your roles from HR to sales, but you still had access, but you don't know it, guess what? It's a Pandora's box. So now AI has that access and information that you may not even know that you did have. And then you're pulling up information saying, they give me the salaries for everybody in 2023. And boom, it comes up into a nice spreadsheet. And I didn't know I had access to that. So having that type of secure guardrails as you do AI is really important. And then we have more of what's coming on with business use cases of how can different lines of business use um, Copilot. So if you're a finance, you're going to have different requirements than you will for a sales, where you can different for somebody that's in services, and different for somebody in legal. They're all going to have their different business use cases. So developing those types of use cases to help people be more productive is something that we're working on right now with adoption and reporting. So one of the big things too is not only when you're adopting AI, you want to make sure your people are using AI and using it correctly. So having that view, which Microsoft has a great dashboard with Viva Insights, you could actually see what's going on and who's using what, and then if they're not using it, why, and help them get that adoption moving forward.
Gotcha. So you're using Viva to actually track the user engagement with Copilot. And out of curiosity, since you all are really on the cutting edge of Copilot and deployments, what is there a specific part of the organization that you think is a really good early adopter? Is this like the finance department? Is it HR? Or is it just kind of across the board here? I guess for business leaders that are out there listening to this, I've got a big organization, 1,000 person plus, and I'm interested in Copilot. Where can I get the biggest bang for my buck?
So where do you start, right? That's a good question. So a lot of the low hanging fruit is going to be around sales and HR. When I say HR, it's more of think about, okay, what's my holiday, what are my holidays for FY24? Or, you know, does my health benefits cover this? You could find that out easily with an AI chatbot, with chatbot infused, looking at your network, your environment, your file system. On the sales side, think about it here. So especially if you have Dynamics or some other technologies with Microsoft with sales as well, you could get more insights about a customer. You haven't contacted this customer in 2 weeks. What are they doing? And AI will help do that for you. Oh, you probably need to send a message to this customer. It's been a week since you talked to them. Reminders. You're having a Teams meeting. You want to recap that meeting and generate notes from that Teams meeting. You could do that. What about if you missed a meeting because you double booked? You can actually go back to that meeting and actually say, okay, Copilot, tell me what I missed and tell me the action items. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because then you pull that into all that information is in the cloud. So all that information is collected into, with Outlook and all your other, OneDrive and everything else. So what I like is I could go ahead and say, ask Copilot, well, tell me the last 5 statements of work that's over $100,000 for this client for this type of technology. Instead of me searching all over the place to find those type of different criteria, it will find that and show it to me and provide me the links, which would have taken me a good 45 minutes to dig through. Copilot would do it within a couple of minutes. So there's your big bang. I think the big bang is with sales and HR. I think finance is going to follow. Right now, there's a finance Copilot in preview right now that's more advanced than the Copilot that finance that has now. And you're going to start seeing a lot more and more of these, changes as Microsoft gets deeper and deeper into Copilot. Copilot's everywhere. Every product. It's not just M365. It's the whole family of Microsoft products that are infused with Copilot. And what Satya's did is he said, go off and do your Copilot infusion through all your product lines. And that's what Microsoft did. But now they're working on getting those, now that they have it, they're starting to bring it all together. So now that they have it all, so it's kind of like a star formation, now you're going to kind of glue it all. And that's what they're doing right now.
Wow, amazing. Well, it's an exciting time to be in this industry. And yeah, it's amazing. It reminds me a lot of the early internet days where there's just this Cambian explosion of technology and enthusiasm. And so it's definitely an exciting time to be part of this group. And I guess in my final question here, just touching back on your comments about the success that you had at Infrascience and ultimately to New Signature and then to Cognizant, you had mentioned, hey, I could potentially retire and not do this anymore, but you're staying in the industry. And my final question is, I think I may know this answer, but I want to ask it. Why are you still here? You've had so much success. You've reached the pinnacle, so to speak. You're the champ almost. And, why stay in the game?
I really enjoy what I do, and I enjoy the relationships and friends that I have. I am in my mid 50s right now. Some of my relationships with Microsoft go back 20 years, and I want them to continue to be successful as they start to go into their end of retirement. I see a lot of people that have retired before me, but I really enjoy what I'm doing. And there's something I kind of leave you with too, is that there's something that video I saw about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was by Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey from Family Feud, and some of the other stuff he did. And he's also an inspirational speaker. And if you go ahead and search Steve Harvey and look for something specifically called Jump, I encourage everyone to take a look at that little 3-minute video, because what he's saying is do not be, if you don't like something you're doing now, don't be afraid to jump and do something that you want to do in the future. So if that is, starting your own company or doing something totally different than what you're doing now, you only have one life, and you need to make that life as fulfilling as possible. And if you don't jump, you always will be on that ledge. So yeah, I would definitely recommend, just see that little video and kind of get some inspiration there of, hey, it's okay to take a risk. I took a risk. It paid off. You're going to fail and you're going to fall. That parachute's not going to open the right way sometimes, but then eventually it will, and you're going to land safely. So, that's kind of my experience. I enjoy what I'm doing. Like I was, fortunate to be rewarded not only financially, and financially is something that, hey, that'll take me with retirement. I don't change my lifestyle, but really working and enjoying what I do. Hence why I'm over at ivision. Is just something I really enjoy doing with a lot of friends.
I think that's the key, is that, it's an exciting time to be in the industry, and, with the success that you're having, it's, I would imagine it's hard to give that up. And, again, there's time for retirement, later, but, you should have fun while you're doing it now. And just, again, congratulations on just an amazing career and all the incredible success that you've had at ivision. So in closing, everyone, Steve Harvey, the 3-minute video, Jump. And Mark, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom, amazing stories about the power of lunch throughout a career and how it can propel you. And it all started at the Home Depot lunchroom. So amazing. Well, Mark, thank you so much again. And we look forward to hearing from you and ivision with all the great things that you do.
Thanks, Scott. And thank you for your years of the friendship that we've had together.
Likewise, my pleasure.